Well, I got a package that I was very excited about. Came from Paris, France. Was sent to me by Satori Films, and they are making Alejandro Jodorowsky's newest movie, and he's one of my all-time heroes. I got this for being part of the crowdsourcing for his next movie. I backed his last movie and got a ticket to the premiere in New York, so I actually got to see him, meet his son. It was pretty awesome. About the coolest thing I've ever done. Met Neil Gaiman, Rosario Dawson, and some of the people responsible for my favorite documentary of all time, which is about Jodorowsky's Dune. So here we go, finally, get to the inside. Because there'll be no trip this time, unfortunately. But I do have this. So, some of his poetic money. I love that, he's just so crazy. Banco Central de Poesía Sin Fin, the Central Bank of Endless Poetry. Endless Poetry was the name of his last movie. Next one is called Psychomagic, an art to heal. Only he could come up with a term like psychomagic, which is kind of his own proprietary shamanistic practice, belief system. But I have a large stack of bills like this from back in the last movie. That was just an extra tossed in. Speaking of extras, I get a little thank you note. Gracias sin fin, basically endless thanks. Que este dinero poético se multiplique en tu vida. May this poetic money multiply throughout your life. I feel like both of those were leftovers from the last movie, but that's fine. Inside this purple brick is the real reason I was excited about this package. Signed deck of cards from Jodorowsky himself. He designed this deck, too. I finally get to open this. I'm actually not into tarot reading, not into that kind of thing in general, but I know it's really important to him. He infuses his movies and comics with imagery from it. It's been interesting just reading up on it a little bit, some of the history and use. Again, not necessarily up my alley, but just like learning anything new. So there are different types of decks, different designs. This is the Marseille, as in Marseille, France. Jodorowsky considers it the true version, and he worked with an ancestor of the family that had been printing them for generations. I'm sure there's experts who disagree with the choices they made, whatever, but they worked intently for years to get this design back to what they consider the original. And although this is outside of my normal interests, I do love this style of art, so if nothing else, it's really cool to see the cards once we get to them. And it's so silly, but I was being really careful with these as I opened them up. Didn't want to make a mistake and accidentally cut one or something as I got the plastic off, because this one was held by the master himself. It's my only signed Jodorowsky artifact. That's the Fool, Le Mat, that starts things off, and probably one of the more famous cards. I mentioned Jodorowsky using this imagery throughout his works. Here's what's mostly considered his masterpiece, Holy Mountain. This is John Lennon's favorite movie, had a little splash of tarot-esque visuals, and his masterpiece in comic books, El Incal. The main character is named John the Fool, as in the Fool, and visually is modeled off of that card. And this is the first time I was actually getting to handle these things. I know he worked really hard on this, and he's been studying the tarot for 40 years, so it kind of, in a way, makes it more special than if it was just the handwritten note, which was awesome too. So you can see how this little booklet was in the middle. It splits the deck into what I understand is called the Major and Minor Arcana. The Major Arcana is the smaller of the two, and it has all the kind of classic symbols that outsiders, laymen, associate with tarot reading. It's got Death, the Fool, the Emperor, the Sun, the Moon. And then the Minor Arcana is much closer to a regular deck of cards, but there's definitely differences, as you can imagine. But they'll go through a sequence, and they're in 4 different suites. So you'll have baton, cup, sword, and coin. Anyway, you get this handy little booklet. It's got some information on the origin, history, symbolism, practice. It's pretty cool stuff, even if you have no intention of, really using it as intended. Like for me, although, I say that and watch me 2 years later make a video where I'm, obsessed with, tarot reading. So here is the Ace of Coins. The coin is also sometimes a pentagram. That's the design that's always on the back. And these look pretty neat. So you can take one suite at a time, like there's the coins, and I jumped straight to the swords from there. And you can see how they progress, like I said, like a regular deck of cards. It's like going from the 1 of hearts to the 2 of hearts, etc. Each suite has 4 face cards. So, for instance, here's the King of Swords. Probably not getting all of the terminology right, but whatever. The 2 of Coins is where the maker would traditionally put his mark, so that's what the team did here. You can see this project was in the late 90s. That's when these came out, and wow, I had no idea who Jodorowsky was at that time. Being as into weapons as I am, see the rest of my channel, I like the baton. It's described in a lot of different sites and literature as a wand, but this one here definitely looks like a club to me. The swords caught my eye too, but, swords are just so overemphasized anyway, just in the popular imagination. And I did write a whole book on impact weapons, so I guess my preference makes sense. So here's the major arcana, and you can see glimpses of most of them, but I love the color palette. That's kind of what I wanted to show here. And a lot of work went into restoring the colors. After a while, during the Industrial Revolution, colors kind of got sapped out of them because machines could only produce like 4. People, of course, stopped in general making them by hand, and dealing with that was all part of the restoration project. Here's some highlights. The Hanged Man, very interesting card, one of the iconic ones. The only character who's upside down. Death, who's also, I read, just an unnamed card, which is an interesting touch. The Devil is suitably freaky, as you can imagine. And of course, none of this stuff is literal, like the Devil card is not about the devil, and the Death card isn't supposed to mean that someone's going to die or anything like that. So, on the other end of the scale, opposite the Devil, here's the House of God. I really like that one. There's also angels on other cards from the major arcana. And then I love this kind of like bizarre beast, medieval and/or Renaissance art. Well, I was looking for Jodorowsky's signature, by the way, when I got this thing, because I was like, I was supposed to get a signed deck, so I was a little disappointed, and then I realized that's where the signature is. So the maestro did not let me down. That is something I'm definitely going to treasure. I just can't say enough about how much he's influenced me. And that was the unboxing of the Jodorowsky Marseille Tarot deck.